What's going on, everybody? This is John J Gaming on the mic here, coming at you with a brand new episode and the final episode of the FCS Dynasty. Yes, you did hear that correctly. Given how things are going with the channel update, we are actually going to simulate season 7, 8, 9, and 10 all in one episode, and it's gonna be very fast paced. We're gonna be looking at how your custom guys are doing, whether they make it to the NFL, who wins national championships. Anyone can create that ability to build a dynasty, possibly here in the final few years of the FCS Dynasty, at least in the YouTube format. But that being said, hope you guys are excited for it here, and if you guys are, make sure you go ahead, smack that like button, hit that subscribe button as well if you do have to be brand new. And since we are here in year number 7, let's go ahead and check out that preseason poll. And this preseason poll is definitely interesting here to start year 7. We see Southeast Missouri State and North Dakota State at 1 and 2, but I think that one of the best teams in the country, I think it's James Madison's national championship to lose. They're an A+ overall squad. They have an A+ defense. So they're going to be a really dangerous football team this upcoming season here in year number 7. Other teams to watch out for to win the national championship do include New Hampshire. Western Carolina is in here as well. Georgia Southern's got a pretty good squad. They lost quite a bit in the transfer portal in the past offseason, if you guys remember that from the year 6 offseason. So that will be interesting to see. The ability that Georgia Southern has to reload, that's really awesome to see. And then some other teams that are ranked in the top 25. You guys are seeing them right now. I'm not going to read them all off to you. But Grambling State does round out the top 25, though. They did make their first FCS playoff appearance. And let's go ahead and check out those award lists, see if any of your custom guys are on there. So in year number 7, this is the preseason Heisman watch as of right now, and Austin Dodd did return for his senior season. He won the Heisman Trophy last year, but there is a few of your custom guys in here. Willie Beeman Jr. is in here. He's a true junior quarterback. He's somebody that, you know, has that ability to make some big plays. Obviously, he's from Western Carolina. We also have DeMarcus Prime, the junior wideout for James Madison. And I didn't realize this over the course of the past couple of years. Dude is 6'10". He is an absolute behemoth, and it's easy to see why he's been a problem the first 2 years at the college level. And then the other custom guy that is on the preseason watch list is Ernie Little. Ernie Little is the junior running back for the New Hampshire Wildcats. He's coming off a 1,200-yard, 13-touchdown kind of season. It's going to be asked to put a pretty big load now that Bruno Baggio has moved on to the NFL. But as for the preseason All-Americans, this is what we're looking at in terms of your custom guys. We got Ernie Little, obviously. He's on the Heisman watch list with John Antilles. He's a very good running back from South Carolina State. He's also coming off a great season, almost 1,500 yards and 15 touchdowns in his sophomore year. He's going to be looking to take the South Carolina State Bulldogs back to their playoffs. In addition, we have DeMarcus Pride on the first team All-American list. He's also on that Heisman watch as well. And then rounding out the offensive side of the ball for your guys' custom players, Andrew Big Bird. He's a junior redshirt. He's been hanging around for a long time, and he's an anchor on that Georgia Southern offensive line. On the defensive side of the ball, we have a couple of customs for you guys as well. We have the junior Kevin McRoyal playing for the Western Carolina Catamounts. Had a great year last year, almost double-digit sacks, forced 5 turnovers as well, and had 81 tackles as well, so a very good and deserving player for that first-team preseason All-American spot. And we also have Jim Sato, the junior corner out of North Dakota State. Jim Sato last season, a player that played some great ball. He had a forced fumble, 2 fumble recoveries, also has multiple defensive touchdowns. Part of the reason why North Dakota State, they were able to come out, and they're the defending national champions, so easy to see why North Dakota State was ranked so highly in that preseason poll in the first place. And then, of course, we have Fu Tai, the junior kicker out of Northern Arizona. Fu Tai is a guy who has really established himself as one of the best kickers at the FCS level. He's back for his junior season, and he has first team all nation nominees for Northern Arizona. Meanwhile, for the second team All-Americans for your guys' customs, we got Talon Fullerton, the senior from the Citadel. Talon Fullerton from the Citadel, he's actually in his final college season, and hopefully he can take the Citadel to their first FCS playoff appearance, because they've actually not made the playoffs yet in this series. Another notable custom trying to get William & Mary into the dance for the first time is Darius Draven. Darius Draven, a very good receiver for the Tribe in his first couple of seasons. Stats don't necessarily show it, but they really have not had the great quarterback play at William & Mary since season number 1. And then, of course, back in year 1, the non-FCS schools were absolute titans, so it was harder for FCS school to make the playoffs. But Darius Draven, he is a very good wide receiver and should make some noise as he searches for his first 1,000-yard season. And then rounding out the customs that are on the All-American list is KJ Emery, the junior free safety from Nicholls State. KJ Emery had 6 interceptions his sophomore season. Really not known for his tackling. He only has 24 tackles for 2 seasons, but he is an absolute ball hawk that deserves his some respect on his name. And of course, we have Ash Young, the kicker from New Hampshire. Ash Young, one of the better kickers in the country as well, as he kicked some very good field goals last year, 80% or better his first couple of seasons, and has only missed 2 extra points, which is very good for an FCS kicker. So that's why he's a second team All-American and part of a very good New Hampshire squad, to say the least. But now that we have all of the All-Americans wrapped up, let's go ahead and check out some of your custom guys that have actually transferred from the FCS level all the way up to the highest level of college football, the FBS. But speaking of your custom guys, though, some of your custom guys, they did transfer from the FCS level. They did move themselves up to the FBS level now, and that includes some guys that were contributors on their various teams last year. JD McCoy, for example, he was from Brown, and he transfers to Arizona State, where he'll be the starting running back for the Arizona State Sun Devils. As for Clayton Lewis, the former linebacker for North Dakota State, he finds himself going to some warmer weather. He'll be the starting linebacker for the Arkansas State Red Wolves over in the Sun Belt. But we do end up seeing some Power 5 transfers as well, as Glenn Scarlone from Southeast Missouri State, he actually is transferring to Clemson and actually has a solid chance of making it to the NFL from Clemson, as he comes in as a 90 overall. Meanwhile, Jerry Rice III, also from North Dakota State, he goes to a Power 5 school in the Houston Cougars, playing out in the Big 12. He is a 83 overall, making some nice gains over there. Speaking of offensive weapons, so Mario Matthews actually transfers to Northwestern. He played his first few seasons of college football at the University of Montana. He'll stay in the northern part of the country, and he'll be the starting running back for the Wildcats. Another notable running back transferring from the FCS ranks, though, is Paul Joseph Forte, the running back for Arkansas Pine Bluff. He's now here playing for the University of Tennessee, playing in that SEC conference. As for Texas State, they get one of the best quarterbacks from the FCS in season number 6, Hans Heinlein, who was playing his college ball at James Madison, but is now here at the Texas State Bobcats University. In other quarterback news, though, Brian Ramsey, the former Delaware quarterback, also finds his spot in the transfer portal. He's going to be playing for the University of Southern Florida and will be their starting quarterback in his final year of collegiate eligibility. And finally, the senior Jeff Boston played his first few seasons of college ball at Georgia Southern. He now goes to the Power 5 as well to play for the West Virginia Mountaineers at 83 overall. He's a starter and possibly an offensive captain for this Big 12 football team. And now that we have seen the top 25 polls, we have seen the some of the custom guys that are on the preseason award watch list, as well as preseason All-Americans. We'll kick it back to the end of the regular season to show you guys the 24 teams that did make the FCS playoffs in year number 7. So we get to the end of the regular season, and we are here. This is what happened in the conference championship week. We do see Western Carolina win the Big 12 championship to start things out. They do beat Grambling State 35-0, and there was also quite a few blowouts that we see here in this conference championship weekend. For example, we also see the number 1 team, James Madison, who finishes undefeated by the way, and they'll get the number 1 overall seed. They beat South Carolina State 52-20. As for the Akron Zips, they blow out Central Michigan 56-16 in order to go to the MAC championship game. We also see Georgia Southern beat Northwestern State really convincingly in order to win 34-10. Finally, SMU in Conference USA, they beat Eastern Carolina 35-10 as the Mustangs finished with an impressive 11-1 record on the season. As for the other conference qualifiers that we did end up seeing that did not have conference championship games, Stanford ends up winning the Ohio Valley Conference, that new look Big Ten, as they finished 10-1 on the year, including an undefeated conference record. They'll have a number 7 overall seed in the tournament. For the Ivy League, the Brown Bears found themselves in a two-way tie between Yale and Columbia, but it is going to be the Brown Bears that find their way to the FCS playoffs once again, thanks to some tiebreakers. As for the Mountain West, no surprises here, as San Diego State once again finishing undefeated in conference play, and they have an undefeated regular season record in general. They finish with the number 2 overall seed and get the automatic bid for the Mountain West. Speaking of undefeated teams in conference play, Montana wins the Big Sky Conference here in year number 7. They finished 10-1, and they finish as the number 3 overall seed in this tournament. And finally, to round out your conference qualifiers, we have New Mexico State, who finishes undefeated in the WAC conference, and they will have an undefeated record that gives them the number 4 overall seed in this tournament. As for other schools that do make it into the FCS playoffs this season, we have Sacramento State, who gets the number 6 overall seed. The Tennessee State Tigers, who get the number 8 seed in this tournament, and that will round out your first round buys in the year 7 playoffs. North Dakota State with a 9-3 record, they get the number 9 seed. Nicholls State, who gets the number 10 seed, they're back in the FCS playoffs once again. Southeast Missouri State, who only, despite having 4 losses, still gets a pretty high record. They end up going with the number 12 seed here in the playoffs. As for South Carolina State, they get back into the FCS playoffs after an 11-2 record. They're going to be the number 14 seed. Portland State also gets back in with an 8-3 record from the Big Sky. They're the number 15 overall seed. Northwestern State gets in there as well in spite of a big loss to Georgia Southern. They're the number 16 seed. And they will take on the Chattanooga Mocs in the first round of the FCS playoffs, who get the number 17 seed. As for who Portland State will go up against, they'll go against the Texas Southern Tigers. Out of the Big 12 Conference, they'll have the number 18 seed. New Hampshire gets in as the number 19 seed. They are representing for that Colonial Conference. Tennessee Martin gets in as well. They're the number 20 seed in this tournament, a very high-profile program at this point. And we also have some newcomers that got the final 2 at-large bids. We got Prairie View A&M with the number 21 overall seed. And we also have Alcorn State making their very first FCS playoff appearance, getting that final at-large bid at the number 22 overall seed. Akron and Brown were unranked, so they did not, they finished with the 23rd and 24th overall seeds respectively. And now we'll go ahead and see what that FCS playoff bracket is going to be looking like. So we get the FCS playoffs started with the very first round, and we got some good games right from the get-go. For example, we have Northwestern State taking down Chattanooga 14-13. That allows the Demons to move on to the second round, where they'll be taking on the James Madison Dukes. But we already get a massive upset as well, as we'll have a new national champion in year 7. North Dakota State falls in the first round. They lose to Brown 23-20. As for SMU, they show that their record was not all that, as they are going to beat Tennessee Martin 37-26 to move on to the next round. Also, we see Southeast Missouri State take down Prairie View A&M 38-31. Texas Southern also goes down. They lose to Portland State 24-7. Meanwhile, the Nicholls State Colonels move on to the second round thanks to a 2-touchdown victory over the Akron Zips, 42-28. As for the New Hampshire Wildcats, still pull off the upset in the first round, taking down South Carolina State 49-39 in a high-scoring game. And finally, in the final game of the first round of the FCS playoffs, Western Carolina got a scare. They beat Alcorn State, though, 29-23, and the Braves will lose their very first FCS playoff appearance game. Now, we move on to the second round of the FCS playoffs, and it starts with James Madison. Number 1 team in the country takes down Northwestern State 52-31. As for the Brown Bears, they are going to be the first Ivy League team to make it to the quarterfinals. They beat Tennessee State 34-31 with 10 unanswered points in the fourth quarter. SMU will also move on to the quarterfinals as well, as they take down New Mexico State 21-10. That undefeated record means they bounce out early. However, an exciting game in the second round, though, as the Redhawks take down Georgia Southern 29-28. I just burped that sexy. Southeast Missouri State wins off of a last-second 2-point conversion. However, Portland State journey ends against San Diego State, as the Aztecs do win 45-37, as they'll take on those San Diego State, or well, we'll see who they play in their next game. And they will be taking on the Sanford Bulldogs, who blow out Nicholls State 49-24. Hondrick Solo was certifying him. For the final quarterfinal matchup, we'll see Montana make it out of the second round as they take down New Hampshire in a shootout, 41-30. And they will take on the Western Carolina Catamounts, who beat Sacramento State 33-20. And this now takes us into the quarterfinals, where James Madison will take down the Brown Bears 49-17. The Cinderella story does come to an end, and James Madison will take on the SMU Mustangs, who beat Southeast Missouri State 31-23. Meanwhile, on the other half of the bracket, San Diego State moves on to the semifinals as they beat Sanford 38-21. They will meet up against Western Carolina, who beats the Montana Grizzlies 42-25. As for how the semifinals goes down, James Madison beats the SMU Mustangs in a very defensive game, but the Dukes do end up winning 17-7. James Madison will meet up against the Western Carolina Catamounts. The Catamounts beat San Diego State in overtime, winning 38-35 in a nice upset. However, when that national championship game did come around, James Madison, they were of a team of destiny. They win 51-7, and the James Madison Dukes will finish with an undefeated record, going 16-0 on the season. As for your Year 7 award winners this time around, Travis Riley does win the Heisman Trophy this year. He had nearly 2,000 yards and 19 touchdowns on the season, but a bunch of your custom guys did finish as runner-up. Grayson Skinner was a ridiculous season, over 6,000 yards passing over the course of the year. He finishes in second place. DeMarcus Pride, his favorite receiver, finishes in third. He had over 2,000 yards receiving. Meanwhile, Willie Beeman Jr., just a sophomore, he finishes with over 5,000 yards passing on the season. And finally, in 5th place is the junior quarterback from Sanford, Hendrik Solo. Hendrik Solo finished with 51 total touchdowns as he led the Bulldogs to the quarterfinals this season. As for your award winners among your custom guys, we'll start with the Maxwell Award. We see Grayson Skinner winning it, followed by Hendrik Solo and DeMarcus Pride finishing as finalists. Willie Beeman Jr., the sophomore from Western Carolina, he's going to finish in 6th place. We do also see St. Thomas in here, of a junior quarterback from North Dakota State. He finishes in 8th. And we see John Antilles, the junior running back from South Carolina State, finish in 10th. For the Bednarik Award, James Donna is going to finish 11th on that list. He is a junior linebacker for the Denver Pioneers. However, the winner does end up being Terry Kramer, the junior redshirt from North Dakota State. As for the best quarterback in the country, no surprise that also goes to Grayson Skinner, followed by guys like Hendrik Solo, Willie Beeman Jr., St. Thomas is here as well, and Henry Paris actually rounds out your list. He's the junior quarterback for Tennessee Martin. For the Walker Award, we see John Antilles win that one this year, as he actually was a finalist for the Maxwell as well. Rounding out the group, though, is the transfer from New Hampshire, Floyd Davis. His first year at Hofstra was very productive. For the best wide receiver, that goes to Travis Riley, who ends up winning the Heisman Trophy as well. But DeMarcus Pride was in a close second, and I thought he should have got it personally. However, among other customs, you have Brian Kahn, who finished in 6th place with 1,500 yards. He's in his final collegiate season for Western Carolina. For the best tight end award, that's going to go to Skimp Baker of SMU, with guys like Leon Rose also getting consideration. He's a senior tight end for the Denver Pioneers. Sophomore redshirt Connor Tawney was also on this list as well. He had 8 receiving touchdowns. As for best offensive lineman, that goes to Jesse Moss, the right tackle from Portland State. Custom guys that do make it in here include Square Avery, the true sophomore from South Carolina State. Speaking of those custom offensive linemen, Square Avery does win the Remington Trophy. For the Lombardi Award, that will go to Ronnie Berry, the senior defensive end from San Diego State. For best linebacker, that goes to Terry Kramer, also from North Dakota State. For the Jim Forpay Award, that goes to senior redshirt Stephen Atkins, representing for Tennessee State. And for the Groza Award, that goes to Ash Young, the junior custom from the University of New Hampshire. Another custom that also made this list was Alexander Volumov. He is a junior redshirt for the Dukes and part of that national championship team. As for best punter, that does end up going to Joe Palmer, who's a sophomore from SMU. Finally, for the best returnman, that goes to Lance Page, the senior redshirt for the UCF Knights. Also on this list, though, is true sophomore Carlton Vester of the Eastern Illinois Panthers. And then quickly going through your All-American lists here, we'll start with the first team guys and checking out your customs. We have Grayson Skinner at the quarterback position, John Antilles at running back, he won the Walker, DeMarcus Pride, who was a finalist for the Heisman Trophy, Square Avery, who did end up winning the Remington Award. And then for our second team All-Americans, we have Ronald Delano, the sophomore running back for Texas Southern, who had 16 total touchdowns. Connor Tawney, who was a finalist for the best tight end in the country award. He's a second team All-American. Henry Merrick, who ends up finishing as a second team All-American too. He's a junior from Georgia Southern. And rounding out your group is Marcus Latimer, the freshman redshirt for Northwestern State. And Ash Young, the junior kicker, who also won that Groza Award. Now, as we are moving through the remaining few seasons of the FCS Dynasty, I'm not going to focus in so much as on every single custom player that is going to graduate, because there's going to be a lot that will be graduating. But that being said, we'll be focusing more so on those leaving early due to pursuing their NFL dreams, or they end up entering the transfer portal. We'll jump in on the defending national champions. We got the James Madison Dukes. And the James Madison Dukes have a couple of custom guys going for the draft. DeMarcus Pride is one of them. He had 2,000 receiving yards in his final college season, so definitely makes a lot of sense for him to chase those professional dreams. And we also have Alexander Volumov, who is a junior redshirt kicker for the James Madison Dukes. He had a very good season as well, was second team all conference. As for Western Carolina, they'll also say goodbye to a couple of custom guys for the NFL potentially, as Kevin McRoyal, who had a great season, over 100 tackles. He ends up declaring for the NFL draft. And then also Pistol McNeil is going to declare for the NFL draft as well. He had a kind of a really great freshman season, but tailed off after that. Next up, we have the Alcorn State Braves, who have a couple of guys leaving for the NFL. Asil Dwayne being one of them. He was starting quarterback for the Alcorn State Braves, leading them to their first FCS playoff appearance. And one of his receivers in Goof Goofington is also going to leave as well. He had 11 touchdown grabs this season. In addition, Georgia Southern says goodbye to Andrew Bird, who is going to be a first-team all-conference guy. He actually started on that national championship squad the year that Georgia Southern did end up winning it all. And then New Hampshire also says goodbye to a couple of guys as well early. Ash Young being one of them. He's the Lou Groza Award winner here in year number 7. And we also say farewell to Ernie Little, who had a fantastic season for the New Hampshire Wildcats. He was a second-team all-conference guy. For North Dakota State, they say farewell to St. Thomas. This was actually his only year starting, but he made the most of it, being a first-team all-conference nominee, and is going to chase bigger plans for either going to the FBS level or chasing that pro sports dream. Now, we do also get a little bit of a surprise as well, as Su Chu Long says farewell as well. He was a first-team all-conference guy in the Ivy League and had 12 touchdowns. We'll see if that translates to a bigger program. As for the South Carolina State Bulldogs, a couple of their guys are going to the NFL. One of them being Jose Carlo Josela. He had 4 interceptions and a touchdown on the way to a second-team all-conference nominee. But the bigger story is John Antilles. He ends his college career with a 2,000-yard season, as well as winning the Doak Walker Award. As for the Sanford Bulldogs, their first-team all-conference quarterback is not staying for his senior year, as he is going to declare for the NFL draft. He had 51 total touchdowns, leading Sanford to a quarterfinals appearance. And rounding out the guys who are leaving early is Sean Taylor, the running back for Western Kentucky. He had 11 total touchdowns this year and will forgo his senior year of eligibility with the Hilltoppers. Now, from the FCS level, there were 26 guys that were selected in the NFL draft here in year number 7. And among those 26 players, there was actually 7 of your custom guys that were drafted into the NFL. We're starting in alphabetical order by the team that they're drafted, going with the Buffalo Bills first. 2 custom guys getting drafted, actually. We got Henry Wells, who was the 18th overall selection in the NFL draft. He's from Montana. And then with the Buffalo Bills' second round pick that was done with the 18th selection, they picked up another custom guy in Bobby Wright, who does play center for Southeast Missouri State. He does have that hidden development trait as well. After that, we have the Indianapolis Colts with their second round selection within the 29th pick in the second round of the NFL draft. They grabbed themselves Diego Figo, who's also from the University of Montana. He played defensive tackle and also carries that defensive hidden trait as well. With one of the last picks in the second round of the NFL draft, though, the San Francisco 49ers grabbed Andrew Big Bird, who started in that national championship game when Georgia Southern won it all. I believe it was in year number 3. He is a hidden development trait guy as well, and he did play for Georgia Southern, obviously. As for the Las Vegas Raiders, with their 13th overall pick in the first round of the NFL draft, they selected the corner out of New Hampshire. They grabbed Otis Grip, who, fun fact, I believe it was back in either year number 2 or year number 3. He actually was somebody that was in that Heisman Trophy discussion for a brief moment, but he had his production tailed off, still had a pretty good college career, and now he's here with the Las Vegas Raiders with a hidden depth trait. But in the 4th round, we do see Glenn Scarlone, who actually started his college career at Southeast Missouri State. He did transfer to Clemson for his senior year. And even though he did not start at Clemson his senior campaign, he still ends up getting drafted in the 4th round by the Los Angeles Rams. And wrapping up the custom players that were drafted in the NFL within year number 7, we have Ray Waddle, who was selected with the 4th overall pick in the NFL draft. Ray Waddle was from Grambling State and carries a hidden depth trait. He actually is going to sit behind Alex Bennett, though, who's in the prime of his career right now. So, interesting to see how that situation is going to look like moving forward. Now, for many of the FCS guys that tried to declare early for the NFL draft, even though they didn't make it to the NFL necessarily, they did manage to find their way on to an FBS program. For example, we find Ernie Little, the transfer from New Hampshire. He's going to be playing for the Baylor Bears his senior year. He's a 91 overall, so he still has a legitimate shot of making it to the NFL. Meanwhile, Su Chu Long from the University of Penn, he transfers to a much more warmer climate place. He goes to the University of Hawaii his senior year, where he'll end up being the #1 wide receiver. Meanwhile, for superstar Pistol McNeil, while he couldn't find his way to the NFL, he is going to be a starter at the FBS level, starting for the Ragin' Cajuns for his last year of eligibility. As for St. Thomas, he's actually going to be buried on the depth chart, but could get some playing experience at Northern Illinois, especially if he does somehow get redshirted his senior season, given he is the third-string quarterback. As for Ohio, they actually end up with multiple transfers from the University of Western Kentucky. We have Sean Taylor, who's going to be the backup running back for the Ohio Bobcats. And then we also have the Luke Groza winner at the FCS level, Ash Young, the New Hampshire transfer, going to play for the Ohio Bobcats as well. But maybe the biggest grab in the FCS portion of the transfer portal is DeMarcus Pride, who's going to be the #3 wide receiver for the Oklahoma Sooners. Also has a legitimate shot of making it to the NFL still. Speaking of wide receivers, we also have Goof Goofington from Alcorn State. He's going to play his last year of college football for the Old Dominion Monarchs, where he'll be expected to be the #2 wide receiver. As for Jose Carlo Hosea, he is going to transfer from South Carolina State over to the Roadrunners of UTSA. He has one more year of college ball remaining, and he'll be the #1 corner for the Roadrunners. As for Asil Delane, who led the Alcorn State Braves to their first FCS playoff appearance in year 7, he'll be playing for Wake Forest, where he'll still have 2 more years of college eligibility remaining. And finally, at Wyoming, we have 2 FCS transfers, one of which being from Sanford, and that is Hondrick Solo, who led the Sanford Bulldogs to the quarterfinals in the year 7 playoffs. And then he'll also have the ability to hand the ball off to John Antilles, who is one of the best running backs in year number 7. The South Carolina State transfer is also playing for the Wyoming Cowboys. But now we find ourselves here in year number 8, and while James Madison may be your defending champions, this cover might suggest something different. Western Carolina looks to be the new sheriff in town, as they're led by their now junior quarterback Louis Beeman Jr. And when you go ahead and take a look at the top 25 polls, they got a pretty legitimate squad. Western Carolina is your preseason #1. And they won that national championship last year, but they have an A overall squad. While James Madison did end up taking a step back, they're still supposed to be a really good team, but maybe not the same caliber team that we saw this past season. Meanwhile, some other teams to possibly look for to win the national championship, Sacramento State possibly, as well as Georgia Southern should be really good programs to really look after. Not to mention, we also have teams like Southeast Missouri State, who come in ranked number 8 in the country. They could have a national championship run as well. Other teams to look out for include North Dakota State, who's going to be ranked number 10 in the country. The Cardiac Cats at number 12. They're trying to get back into the FCS playoffs, as they did miss out back in year number 7. And then if you want a really deep sleeper, check out what's going on down at number 36. The Eastern Kentucky Colonels are here, but they have a team that does have the ability to make a deep run, and so they're my dark horse to possibly make the national championship game if they can remain healthy and they get a couple of things bounced their way. As for who is going to be on top of the preseason Heisman watch, no surprises here. Willie Beeman Jr. is on this list, and he had a great season last year. Threw for 54 touchdowns versus 16 interceptions. We'll see if he can come up with similar production, but a little bit of a surprise here. We got the junior quarterback out of Southern Utah, Jeremy Miller. Haven't really heard much from Southern Utah in this series. They haven't been that great of a program, but he had a great year last year as well, throwing for 43 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. We also have the senior, Phil McRae. He's now the new starting quarterback for the Southeast Missouri State Redhawks. And then rounding out the group is a couple of wide receivers. Adam Johnson, who is from Sacramento State. He's a senior. And then we also have the junior wide receiver for the Sanford Bulldogs in Eric Ford. As for your All-Americans, at least among your custom guys, we'll start with the first team guys, and no surprises here. Got Willie Beeman Jr. on this list, as well as guys like Ronald Delano out of Texas Southern, and Zion Bridges, the junior redshirt for the Sanford Bulldogs. Also on this list is last season's Remington Award winner, and that is Square Avery. He's now a junior at South Carolina State. Then we also have a couple of guys on the defensive side of the ball for the first team group. We got Corey Hopkins, who's now a senior redshirt for the Western Carolina Catamounts. He's turning into a possible NFL prospect here at the NFL level. And then we also got Marcus Latimer, a sophomore redshirt at Northwestern State. He's a certified baller too. As for notable guys on the second team All-American list, we got Mohamed El-Bassa. Mohamed El-Bassa, now a senior redshirt for the Catamounts. He had a very good year last year with 1,300 yards and 13 touchdowns. And then the last custom that was on the All-American list is Will Smith IV. He is now a junior corner for the Elon Phoenix. And with that being said, you guys seen the preseason stuff? I'll cut it back to the end of the regular season to see who gets automatic bids and who are the at-large teams that are going to the playoffs in year number 8. Alright boys, so we are here at the end of the regular season, and we get some great results in terms of maybe some newcomers to the FCS playoffs. We'll start with the at-large bid, or not the at-large bids, but the automatic bids. Western Carolina does secure it. They went undefeated on this season. The preseason number 1 lives up to those expectations. They beat Alabama State 52-21. We do also see Eastern Michigan win the MAC automatic bid. They go unranked though, although they do beat Buffalo 56-28. Sam Houston State beats Georgia Southern 28-24 in what was an action-packed game. The Cardiac Cats are back. And speaking of being back, Delaware, after a rough season 7, they beat New Hampshire in order to win the ACC championship. They're a top 10 team as well. And for the last of the conference championships, Rice and Richmond met up for the Conference USA championship, and Rice does win 28-21 in order to get the Conference USA bid. As for the other conferences that did not have conference championship games in year number 8, we do see Tennessee Martin secure it for the Big Ten Conference. They do get back to the FCS playoffs once again, led by their senior quarterback Henry Paris. We also have ourselves a newcomer for the Ivy League automatic bid, the Princeton Tigers. They get their first automatic bid as they finish 6-1 in Ivy League play. Out on the West Coast, though, we see San Diego State once again winning the Mountain West title. They finish with a 7-1 record, so they'll be getting into the playoffs once again. For the Pac-10, it's North Dakota State, who's one of the best teams in the country, and that continues to show. They'll also get a first-round bye. And rounding out the automatic bids is New Mexico State. They do end up winning the WAC championship once again. But there was a really close team in Southern Utah. They almost win that automatic bid, but they did end up losing to New Mexico State, so that's why they did not win the tiebreaker, unfortunately. Tough look for the program. But now we go ahead and jump into the teams that get an automatic bid to at least be an at-large in the FCS playoffs. Your best at-large team this season was Montana. Their only loss was to North Dakota State, and they're going to be rewarded heavily. They'll get that number 2 seed. Eastern Kentucky, that was a team that I had as a dark horse, and it looks like that's turning into fruition, going from unranked to number 7 in the country. They'll get a first-round bye as well. Meanwhile, SMU only losing 1 game, not going to the conference championship, but still getting the last first-round bye in the FCS playoffs. Georgia Southern, they lose to Sam Houston State, so they lose out on a chance to get a first-round bye, but still a number 9 seed. As for Southeast Missouri State, they have a little bit of a rocky season, but still given plenty of respect as they're the number 11 seed. Texas Southern gets the number 12 seed in this tournament. Northern Arizona from the Big Sky Conference, they get the 13 seed. Tennessee State is back in the playoffs once again, but they are here as a 14 seed. Meanwhile, Alabama State makes their very first FCS playoff appearance. They finished 10-2, and they're doing so. They really came a far way ever since back in year number 1 when they lost by 100 points to New Mexico State on national television. Portland State does get the number 16 seed. They are that is the Portland State Vikings. At 17, it's New Hampshire Wildcats, who finished with another very good record. At 18 is Weber State, and they'll be making their very first FCS playoff appearance. At number 20 is the Chattanooga Mocs back in the playoffs. And then the very last team to get a at-large bid is the Sacramento State Hornets, who finished 7-4 with a 5-3 record in the Big Sky Conference. Couple of teams that were left out but were definitely deserving was Sanford at 23, Ball State at number 24, and then Nicholls State was ranked number 25 in the country. So let's go ahead and jump right into the playoff action, and we'll start in the first round. We start with Portland State handling its business against New Hampshire as the Vikings win 32-17. They'll move on to take on Western Carolina. In other first round matchups, we have a shootout between Georgia Southern and New Mexico State, but the Georgia Southern Eagles do come out on top, winning 48-45. Meanwhile, Chattanooga beating Northern Arizona in the first case of an upset. Chattanooga beating the Lumberjacks 40-24. Speaking of upsets, technically a team that's not supposed to be in here, Sacramento State, they actually beat Texas Southern 45-38, so they're in because of tough circumstances, but they're making the most of their opportunity. Meanwhile, both of these two teams playing in their very first FCS playoff games, but it's going to be Weber State that's going to come out on top. They beat Alabama State 30-20. As for Princeton, their first FCS playoff experience, well, they got a lot of work that needs to be done to compete with the big boys. They lose to Delaware 49-9 in the biggest blowout in the first round. San Diego State, meanwhile, will be upsetting the Tennessee State Tigers 42-28, and it will be the Aztecs that will move on to the second round. And for the last of the first round games, it will be Eastern Michigan that comes out on top, beating Southeast Missouri State 24-10, capping off a disappointing season for the Redhawks. But now we move on to the second round of the FCS playoffs, and it's a close one to get things started, but the Catamounts do prevail, winning 32-30, led by Willie Beeman Jr. It looks like the Catamounts will be going up against Georgia Southern in the quarterfinals as the Eagles dispatch the SMU Mustangs 28-13. For the second quadrant of the bracket, a huge surprise here as North Dakota State gets bounced early. They lose to Chattanooga 31-27. As for who Chattanooga will go up against, they're going to play against Sacramento State as they beat Tennessee Martin 31-27, as they also pull the upset off too. Meanwhile, in the bottom half of the bracket, we continue to see some surprises as the number 2 overall seeded Montana Grizzlies, they lose 52-31, so it's Weber State moving on to the quarterfinals. As for who Weber State will go up against, it will be Eastern Kentucky as they beat the Delaware Blue Hens 48-35. As for the last quarter of this bracket, James Madison, who's your defending national champions, they will beat San Diego State 37-27 to move on to the quarterfinals. And the team that James Madison will go up against is Sam Houston State, as the Cardiac Cats beat the MAC champions 28-12. But now we move forward to the quarterfinal matchups, and Western Carolina takes down Georgia Southern 49-20 as the Catamounts move on to the semifinals. And it looks like in the semifinals, they will meet up with Sacramento State, taking down fellow Cinderella Chattanooga 38-35. However, we do know that there will be a new national champion as James Madison actually loses to Sam Houston State, the Cardiac Cats winning 45-28. As for who the Sam Houston State Cardiac Cats will go up against in the semifinals, they will be running into Eastern Kentucky as they beat Weber State 36-33. As for how the semifinals games went, we had an absolute epic show in the semifinals. Western Carolina, in a shootout with Sacramento State, they find a way to win the ball game as Western Carolina wins 59-54. As for who they'll play in the national championship game, it's going to be the Eastern Kentucky Colonels, who started the season unranked, by the way. Will they take down Sam Houston State 24-16 to make their very first national championship appearance. And finally, in terms of how the national championship goes, it was more of a formality for the Catamounts as Western Carolina wins their second national championship here in this series. They beat Eastern Kentucky 63-38. But now we go ahead and check in on the award winners as well as the All-Americans, and we'll start with the Heisman Trophy. Willie Beeman Jr., he truly lived up to the hype, being a true freshman starter for a very high-profile program in the FCS. Willie Beeman is going to be taking home the Heisman Trophy with 74 total touchdowns. Other guys that were in that Heisman Trophy conversation, though, was Carl Allen, the senior running back for Sam Houston State. Quarterback Jack Quinn, who's one of your custom guys as well. He threw for 56 total touchdowns on the season. In fourth place was Isaac Blair, the senior wide receiver from Buffalo. In spite of not making the playoffs, he made a lot of noise. And rounding out the group is J.J. Simmons, the junior redshirt quarterback from San Diego State. Now, in terms of the other award winners, we'll start with the Maxwell. Checking in on your custom guys specifically, Willie Beeman does obviously win the Maxwell Award with guys like Henry Paris in consideration, as well as Jack Quinn. Could very well see these two guys at the NFL level. Also in here as well is Sung Soon Lee, the junior redshirt from Alabama State, who led the Hornets to their first FCS playoff appearance in the series. Meanwhile, for the Bednarik Award, that will go to Cliff Scott, the senior middle linebacker from North Carolina A&T State. But we also have some love for Corey Hopkins as well, who, a little bit of a spoiler, he was also named a first-team All-American. Also in this group is J.J. Mathis Jr., who finishes 10th for the Bednarik Award. He is a junior redshirt from Arkansas Pine Bluff. He had 6 sacks and 16 TFLs on the year. As for best quarterback, it's going to be your same group for the Maxwell Award, as Willie Beeman also brings that trophy home. Winning also in consideration too was Henry Paris, the senior from Tennessee Martin, and Jack Quinn, the senior from Sacramento State. Plus, not to mention, we do also see Sung Soon Lee in here, who again was on that Maxwell Award finalist list. Rounding out the group, though, is the senior redshirt Jet Li. Jet Li was somebody that did not get a lot of playing time till his senior year, but in the year he actually was the starter, he did make the most of his opportunity. As for the Doak Walker Award, that will go to Ronald Delano, the junior running back out of Texas Southern. Look for him to possibly declare either for the NFL draft or transfer up to an FBS level. Also in here is Zion Bridges, the junior running back out of Sanford, who finished with over 1,100 total yards on the year. And rounding out the group is quite a few customs, actually. Devontae Arthur, the junior redshirt from South Carolina State. Armo Klimper, the senior running back out of Arkansas Pine Bluff. And Tyler Creator, the senior redshirt from Delaware. He had 3,000 all-purpose yards on the year. For the best wide receiver award, that will go to Andrew Bray, the senior wideout for South Dakota State. But there is one of your customs that is on this list as well. That is junior wide receiver Carlton Vester out of Eastern Illinois. He had 800 yards and 13 touchdowns on the year. Up next is the best tight end award, and that will go to Patrick Miller out of Tennessee Martin. In his final college season, he had 11 touchdowns. But also in this group as well is Elvin Usbayo, the junior tight end from Sacramento State, finishes 4th. As for the best offensive lineman in the country, they are going to award it to Xavier Tyree, the junior redshirt out of Elon. He only allowed 2 sacks this season. As for the Remington, that will be awarded to Mike Bean, the senior redshirt from Rice, and he only allowed 1 sack all year. For the Lombardi Trophy, that will be awarded to Michael Thomas, the junior defensive end from Sanford. We do have at least one of your guys' customs on this list as well, and that is Nwanko Koromora IV. He's a senior at Southeastern who puts together a solid campaign in his last year of college eligibility. As for the best linebacker award, that will be awarded to Jacob Sullivan, the senior linebacker out of North Carolina A&T. Corey Hopkins does find himself on that list as well. The senior redshirt put together a phenomenal season. Also on here as well is J.J. Mathis Jr. of Arkansas Pine Bluff. He finishes 8th. And now we go to the Jim Forpay Award, which will be awarded to sophomore corner Josh Bostic. Josh Bostic with 4 interceptions on the season. But in terms of custom and consideration, Camille Sanji was mixing things up. He finishes 4th place for the Jim Forpay Award and represents for Portland State. Starting to get closer to the end, here we have the Groza Award, which will be given to Western Carolina kicker Andrew Moses. But in 3rd place is one of your guys' customs, Joseph Eucelius. He finishes in 3rd place for the Groza Award category. As for the best punter, that will be given to Jonathan Justice, who is just a true freshman. He played for the Montana Grizzlies this past fall. And the last award is going to be handed to Darius Draven out of William and Mary, the custom wide receiver. Ends up with also 800 yards on the year with 7 touchdowns. Also in the running as well was Will Smith IV, who ends up in 2nd place. And Tyler Creator finishes in 4th, part of that 3,000 all-purpose yard season. But now we move on to the All-Americans real fast, and not a lot of surprises on this list. We do have Louis Beeman Jr., who is the first-team All-American at quarterback, alongside Ronald Delano, the junior from Texas Southern, who did win that Walker Award. We also have Darius Draven in here. Now, that's a little bit of a surprise because he did not have a 1,000-yard season, but was the best returnman in college football. Meanwhile, on the defensive side of the ball, we had a couple of your custom guys as well. Corey Hopkins obviously being one. He put together a great season. And at the strong safety position, we have David Dimitar from Sam Houston State, who was a ball hawk for the Cardiac Cats. As for the 2nd-team All-American guys, Jack Quinn finds himself on this list. He's playing for Sacramento State. Tyler Creator from Delaware is also on here. He's a senior redshirt. And then on the defensive side of the ball, we have Akash Terrell from Texas Southern. He's a junior there for the Tigers. We also have Julian Filipino up here too, the senior linebacker playing in his last year of college football, had over 100 tackles. And of course, rounding out your custom guys is Will Smith IV, who's a junior corner playing for the Elon Phoenix. But as we progress through the Year 8 offseason, we do have some of your customs that are actually going to leave either for the NFL or for the transfer portal at the FBS level. This one, of course, will be no surprise. Willie Beeman Jr., 6'4", 226 pounds, Heisman Trophy winner. He's a certified dog. Also leaving from the Western Kentucky program as well is Charles Watt. Had a very good season and will be trying his hand at the NFL level as well. Now, I thought this one was a little bit surprising, but Young Sung Lee of Alabama State, he is going up either to the FBS level, which is where his more likely landing spot is, or the NFL could be calling his name as well. Either way, he played his last year at Alabama State. As for Terrell Johnson, the junior redshirt from Delaware, he's also going to forgo his last year at Delaware to try his hand at higher Division I football or the NFL as well. The same thing could also be said for Austin Blair, the junior redshirt quarterback at Georgia Southern, threw for over 3,000 yards and will forgo his last year at Georgia Southern. He still has one more year of eligibility. Meanwhile, for Sacramento State, they will say goodbye to Henry Long, who is really turning into a solidified NFL prospect. The Hornets are looking to send yet another high-quality offensive lineman to the NFL. As for Sam Houston State, they'll say goodbye early to David Dimitar. David Dimitar ends up with 6 TFLs and a defensive touchdown as well, on the way to being a first-team All-American. But then Texas Southern will say goodbye to their Doak Walker Award winner. Ronald Delano will forgo his last year of eligibility to try the NFL waters or transfer up to an FBS program. And finally, for your custom guys within year number 8, we'll say farewell to Charles Dowdell. He's a junior defensive end at Weber State, and after double-digit sacks and 23 tackles for loss, he wants to try FBS college football. And with the increasing amount of talent in the FCS Dynasty, we're starting to see some more guys getting drafted. We've seen 26 players drafted to the NFL, and 9 of them were actually your custom guys. We'll start with the Buffalo Bills with their 14th overall selection. They grabbed the right tackle out of Sacramento State. They grabbed Henry Wong, who could be a very good player for the Bills with that hidden dev trait. As for the Los Angeles Chargers, they opt to take 2 of your custom guys actually. Starting with the second round pick for the LA Chargers, Oliver Maxey actually played for the Denver Pioneers, but Denver is not in Madden for whatever reason, so he's going to be listed as a Dayton Flyer, still an FCS guy, and the first draft pick in this series from the Denver Pioneers. As for their first round selection though, they will grab another one of your guys' customs, Jose Pilo, the cornerback out of James Madison. He was selected with the 13th overall pick and has that hidden dev trait as well. Meanwhile, for the Philadelphia Eagles, we see Kamil Sajid from Portland State being selected. He was the 15th selection in the second round of the NFL draft. He also does come with a hidden development trait of his own. As for the number 2 overall selection in the NFL draft, they actually select Henry Paris, the quarterback out of Tennessee Martin. Now, this Dynasty final actually does have Zach Wilson working out, so he's going to be fighting it out in his rookie season for that backup quarterback position. Also selected in the first round of the NFL draft is Maximus O'Hara, the corner out of North Dakota State. He was selected by the Baltimore Ravens with their 19th overall selection. He's also a hidden development trait kind of guy. Keeping it in the AFC North though, we also have Corey Hopkins from Western Carolina being selected by the Pittsburgh Steelers with the 22nd overall pick. He's going to represent well for Western Carolina, even though he is just a normal dev trait person. With the 6th overall selection in the NFL draft, the Houston Texans actually select Willie Beeman Jr., the quarterback out of Western Carolina. Hidden dev trait guy, led a team to a national championship, and is the reigning player of the year in the FCS. He left a year early. And last but not least, we have somebody that actually started his college career at New Hampshire before going ahead and transferring over to the Baylor Bears. That is none other than Ernie Little. Ernie Little is going to be drafted by the Tennessee Titans in the 2nd round of the NFL draft, and he is also going to be a hidden dev trait guy as well, as this does wrap up your custom selected in the NFL here in the Year 8 offseason. But not while all of your custom guys made it to the NFL, there were some that also made their way up to the FBS ranks, specifically in the Power 5. We start out with Charles Watt, who is actually a transfer from Western Carolina, for example. He's now here at Arizona State and is going to have some big expectations in his final college season, as he's going to be the #1 corner for the Arizona State Sun Devils going into this season. As for the Miami of Ohio, yes, not the one in Florida, actually 2 quarterbacks transferred there. We have Austin Blair, who's a transfer from Georgia Southern, and then young Sun Il of Alabama State also finds himself there. So they're both similar overalls. They're both 81 overalls at the FBS level. So it's going to be really interesting to see who wins that quarterback job and really thrives in that battle situation. Meanwhile, for Missouri, they get David Dimitar, who is going to be at the Missouri Tigers. He's going to be starting strong safety for them, and he is going to be transferring from Sam Houston State. As for Ronald Delano, one of the best running backs in FCS football from Texas Southern, actually is going to go to the Naval Academy. So the great thing about him is that if he does not find his way to the NFL, he can still serve us on a greater battlefield, serving our country. So nice placement for Ronald Delano. Of course, we also have Charles Dowdell, the transfer from Weber State. He stays on the West Coast sort of and goes to North Texas. It will be expected to be the starting defensive lineman for them right away for the Mean Green. And of course, we have Terrell Johnson, the wide receiver, who now finds himself in Conference USA, playing over at Southern Miss. He's going to be a guy that's going to be the #2 wide receiver early on for the Southern Miss Golden Eagles. We're going to also try to go out there and make that immediate impact as well. But now we usher in a brand new season of FCS college football once again. And again, the magazines really do like Western Carolina riding that 16-game winning streak, but we'll go ahead and see if there's any other national championship contenders that are out there. And it looks like there is quite a few. While Western Carolina will once again start out as the preseason #1, they were the preseason #1 in the start of year #8 as well. There are also some other teams to look after. We also got teams like James Madison, Georgia Southern, Sacramento State that have that ability to win a national championship as well. Southeast Missouri State, they had a disappointing year #8, but they come back with a really talented football team, and they can really make some noise possibly. And then other teams to watch out for, Nicholls State, they're on the rise, coming in preseason #14 team in the nation. They got an 8 overall squad as well. They're going to be built different, and that is going to wrap up at least the top 25. Now, as for some players to watch out for to potentially win the Player of the Year this year, got some new cast of players. Got guys like Johnny Osborne, the junior out of Chattanooga, that, could do some damage. Also have guys like Alan Watts, the senior redshirt from James Madison. He could make some moves as well. Other players to watch out for is Keith Booth, the senior quarterback from New Mexico State. The junior wide receiver Matt Seven from Prairie View A&M, and rounding out the group is Bobby Williams, the junior running back from Sacramento State. And of course, we start getting into the All-Americans, at least with some of the customs that did make the preseason All-American list. We have Prince Davis, the junior redshirt from Texas Southern, that did make it onto this list. And then on the defensive side of the ball, we have Akash Terrell, the senior defensive tackle, also playing for the Texas Southern Tigers. At corner, we have Will Smith IV, who is now a senior at this point for the Elon Phoenix. And that did end up wrapping up the first team guys. Now, going over to the second team All-Americans, we have Devontae Arthur, who is now a senior redshirt over at South Carolina State at this point in the Dynasty. We also have Elvin Uzbayo of Sacramento State. He is now also going to be a senior. And that wraps up the custom guys that did make that All-American list. We should be in for a fun season number 9 as well. I'll cut it back to the end of the regular season to reveal the 24 teams that managed to make the FCS playoffs in year number 9. Alright boys, so we made it to the end of the season number 9 regular season, and boy did we have some insane stuff happen in the regular season. First, with the stuff that you typically do see, James Madison, they do win the ACC this year. They beat Delaware 49-25. We also see Central Michigan go back to the FCS playoffs after an overtime victory over Akron in the MAC championship. And we also see Northwestern State get the number 1 overall seed in the tournament after beating Georgia Southern 35-7. They're the only undefeated team in the country. Meanwhile, we have some insane stuff happening in other conference championships, as Alabama A&M was 1 game away from going to the playoffs for the first time, but Alcorn State is going to deny them by winning 35-28. They steal that automatic bid. As for bid stealers, we got Towson. Towson will be going to the playoffs for the very first time. They beat SMU 31-14. As for the other conference champions that are determined, Eastern Kentucky gets the automatic bid for the Ohio Valley Conference. A very good record this season. They end up going 9-2 with a 6-2 conference record. They're in a three-way tie, but because of tiebreakers, they do win the bid. Meanwhile, for the Ivy League, we will once again see the Princeton Tigers go back to the FCS playoffs, their second appearance in 2 seasons, winning just barely over teams like Yale and Cornell as well. In the Mountain West, there is a brand new conference champion, and that is UNLV, who wins the tiebreaker by beating San Diego State in conference play this season. So we'll see if the Mountain West becomes a 2-bid league. In the meantime, Montana also going to the FCS playoffs automatically, courtesy of winning that Big Sky Conference. They're the sole possession of the championship trophy. And finally, wrapping up the automatic bid, Stephen F. Austin. They are going to the FCS playoffs for the very first time in this series. They beat both New Mexico State and Utah State in order to make their first appearance in the Big Dance. So with the number of teams that got automatic bids and were unranked, despite of that, this was a brutal year for the at-large pool. The teams that did end up making the playoffs still from that at-large pool was North Dakota State, Portland State at number 4, Alabama State gets in at number 5, Tennessee Tech, they are actually in for the first time since year 1, they get in at number 7, and we see Georgia Southern get that last first round bye spot as the number 8 seed. As for the number 9 seed, that will go to Southeast Missouri State. Number 10 goes to Texas Southern. 11 going to the defending national champions, the Western Carolina Catamounts. Number 12 going to the Tennessee State Tigers. 13 going to San Diego State. 14 going to the Chattanooga Mocs. Number 16 going to the Murray State Racers. They're in for their second playoff appearance. 17 going to the Sam Houston State Bearcats. And the last team that got in because of a at-large slot is the Temple Owls, who somehow managed to get in as an independent school. They finished with a 9-2 overall record. But guys, you want to talk about the amount of talent left out of the playoffs this year? Sacramento State is going to be left out. They're 19th ranked. Eastern Illinois is ranked number 20 in the country. Northern Arizona is the number 21st ranked team in the nation. And then we also see teams like New Mexico State, Texas State, Alabama A&M, and of course the Delaware Fighting Blue Hens. Tough year to be an at-large this season. We had a chaotic regular season year. But let's go ahead and not waste any more time by jumping right into the Season 9 FCS playoffs. Our first round matchup was Murray State versus Sam Houston State, and the Murray State Racers win big, winning 45-17. They will take on Northwestern State the next round. After that, we have Southeast Missouri State taking care of business against the Ivy League champions as the Redhawks win 52-14 to move on to the second round. But we also have our fair share of close games in the first round of the playoffs, starting with San Diego State. They beat Central Michigan 39-36. To round out the top half of the bracket, though, we have Tennessee State beating the Alcorn State Braves 44-24. Now, in the bottom half of the bracket, we have Eastern Kentucky taking on Temple, and Eastern Kentucky winning convincingly 42-18 in the ball game. As for Towson, they made their very first FCS playoff appearance against Texas Southern, but Texas Southern was just too much, winning 42-9 in the first round game. As for UNLV, they will actually pull off the upset here in the first round of the playoffs. They will take down Chattanooga 34-31. And finally, we see your defending national champions taking on Stephen F. Austin. And Stephen F. Austin actually put up a pretty daring fight, but the countamounts were too much as the defending champs move on after a 45-31 win. But now we move on to the second round of the FCS playoffs, though, as Northwestern State gets it started, winning 34-24 against the Murray State Racers. And we will see Northwestern State take on Georgia Southern, and that will be a rematch of the SEC Championship, as they were able to dispatch the Redhawks 28-27. In the second quadrant of this bracket, we do see yet another upset as San Diego State will actually beat up the Portland State Vikings in a shootout 40-35. As for Alabama State, who makes their second FCS playoff appearance in 2 seasons, Alabama State beats Tennessee State 38-31 to move on to the quarterfinals. Meanwhile, James Madison continues its strong run to the national championship possibly as they beat Eastern Kentucky 34-27. As for who James Madison will be going up against, they will be facing against the Texas Southern Tigers, who beat Tennessee Tech 30-23 to move on to the quarterfinals. And then to decide the final quarterfinal matchup, we see North Dakota State beat UNLV 29-7. They will run up against the Montana Grizzlies, who beat up the defending national champions 38-10. And so that means we will see a new national champ. As for how the quarterfinals panned out, Georgia Southern taking down the number 1 seeded Northwestern State Demons. They're given their only loss of the season as Georgia Southern wins 41-27. Georgia Southern will run up against the San Diego State Aztecs, who are on a run of their own, beating the Alabama State Hornets 47-31. As for the other semifinal game, we'll see James Madison advance to the semifinals after a 32-27 victory over the Texas Southern Tigers. And James Madison will be going up against the Montana Grizzlies as they beat the North Dakota State Bison 31-21. So now we move on to the semifinals of the FCS playoffs, and a couple of shockers here. San Diego State in overtime is going to beat the Georgia Southern Eagles 26-23. And we will also see them take on the Montana Grizzlies in the national championship as Montana finds a way to beat James Madison 40-30 in this one. And finally, we end up seeing San Diego State winning the national championship. They beat the Montana Grizzlies 38-28. This will be their very first national championship in this series here in year number 9. So now we'll go ahead and see who ends up winning various awards as well as get the All-American honors. Starting with the Heisman Trophy, we have Alan Bobo, who does win the Heisman Trophy this season for the Texas Southern Tigers. He is considered a junior redshirt. Also in this group is Emmanuel Torres of North Dakota State. He's just a true sophomore. Carlos Munn, who's a junior redshirt. And we also have guys like Aaron Wheeler, the senior quarterback for Western Carolina, and Corey Bennett, the senior wide receiver from San Diego State, part of that national championship team. As for the other awards that are out there, Alan Bobo is going to take home the Maxwell Award for this season. But we do also see Carlos Munn get consideration as well. He finishes 9th in the race. And we also see PJ McNair Jr., who led the Alcorn State Braves to yet another FCS playoff appearance. As for the Bednarik Award, that will go to Cedric Riley this season. He's a senior redshirt from Sam Houston State. We do also see Gordon Tucker make the semifinalist cut. He's a senior custom playing for the Murray State Racers. As for the best quarterback in the country, that will be given to Keith Booth, who is the senior quarterback for the New Mexico State Aztecs. But we once again do see some love for Carlos Mudd, the junior redshirt custom from James Madison, and PJ McNair Jr., the junior redshirt from Alcorn State. As for the Doak Walker Award, that would be no surprises here, as Alan Bobo is going to collect this award as well for Texas Southern. But we do end up seeing Devontae Arthur in his final year of college eligibility finish 7th for the Doak Walker Award. He's at South Carolina State. And now for the best wide receiver in the country, that is going to go to Stephen Bonds, who finishes with nearly 100 catches. He's a junior wideout from Montana. As for the best tight end in the country, that will be given to the sophomore Jonathan Corbett. Jonathan Corbett playing for Alabama A&M. They nearly made it to the FCS playoffs this season. However, a little bit love for the senior redshirt custom, Connor Tani. Connor Tani in his final year of college eligibility for the Georgia Southern Eagles. As for the best offensive lineman in the country, that will be provided to Connor Wright out of Rice. He's a sophomore redshirt. Meanwhile, for the Remington Award, that will be given to Willie Jean, the sophomore redshirt out of the University of Delaware. However, a couple of custom guys did make the list. Square Avery, the true senior, being one of them. He finishes in 4th place. And then the junior redshirt Prince Davis, who was named a preseason All-American, he finishes 6th for the Remington Award as well. But now, moving on to the Lombardi Award race, that will be given to Brody Gold this season. He's a junior redshirt from Southeast Missouri State. Finishing in 3rd place, though, is the senior Wallace O'Brien, who finishes in 3rd in his last year of college eligibility. As for the best linebacker in the country, that will also be given to Cedric Riley. That's his 2nd award of the season. For the Jim Forpay Award, that will go to the senior redshirt Chad Humphrey of Northwestern State. He plays that free safety position. After that, we have the Lou Groza Award, which will be provided to the sophomore kicker Nick Mullins, who plays for Georgia Southern. He's only in his sophomore year. But we do have a custom player appearance in Aaron, who's a junior redshirt at Western Carolina. In his first year as a starter, he finishes in 11th place. And of course, we have the best punter in the country, Albert Jacobs, who plays for the James Madison Dukes, winning it in his final season of college eligibility. And finally, the best return man in all of college football is going to go to Marcus Williams, the junior corner from Chattanooga. Also got a defensive touchdown on the season as well. Devontae Arthur of South Carolina State also finds himself on the list. He finished in 6th place in the best return man award. Also in here is the senior Jahan Abd Al-Latif. Now that is quite the name, but in his final year of college eligibility, he also finishes on this award hunt. In the meantime, we do also see Kenneth Doman III in here as well. He's a senior redshirt from Tennessee Tech who finishes in 8th place. And finally, we go to the custom guys that did make it to the All-American list here in year number 9. And the only first-team guy that was named this season was J.J. Mathis Jr., who's a senior redshirt at Arkansas Pine Bluff. However, on this second-team All-American list, we do have a little bit of love for Reese's Pieces, as he's a senior at Bethune-Cookman. He ends up with 22 pancakes versus allowing just a couple of sacks. Also on the defensive side of the ball, we do also see James Pride, who's a senior defensive tackle at Southeast Missouri State, who logged 11 sacks over the course of the season. Now, jumping into the offseason here in year number 9, while we don't see as many of your custom guys as declaring for the NFL draft a year early, there's still some pretty notable names. One of the most notable, arguably, is Carlos Mudd. He took over as the starting quarterback for James Madison, threw for 5,000 yards and 54 touchdowns, so he's going to forgo his senior year in order to try his hand at the NFL ranks. Also looking to join the NFL ranks as well is Marcus Latimer, who's been a lockdown defender as a 3-year starter for the Northwestern State Demons. He'll also forgo his senior year of college eligibility. And finally, someone that I was a little bit surprised of them trying to go to the NFL, and it was Prince Davis. Prince Davis is a junior redshirt at the center position, and at 89 overall, he's also going to try to go into the NFL draft, but the worst case scenario is he could also land at an FBS program, as he does have one more year of eligibility to work with as well. And now, speaking of the NFL draft, let's go ahead and see which one of your custom guys ends up being a part of that Season 9 NFL draft class from the FCS Dynasty. So with that being said, let's go ahead and check out that Season 9 recruiting class, at least going over to the NFL. And we will start with my fabled Cincinnati Bengals, who end up drafting an FCS guy in the second round of the NFL draft. They end up picking up the defensive end out of Tennessee Tech, Wallace O'Brien, who's going to be coming in as 22 years old and is a normal development trait guy. But the Cleveland Browns, they go bold with the number 1 overall selection, and it goes to Henry Corso, the quarterback out of Idaho State. He'll be a hidden depth trait guy, and if you look at this depth chart real quick, he'll be expected to be the starting quarterback right away for the Cleveland Browns. Big reason why they did not have the best of seasons last year. As for the number 8 overall selection, we got James Pride selected by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. James Pride is from Southeast Missouri State, and he'll be coming in as a normal dev trait guy. Meanwhile, for the Los Angeles Chargers, they go to the FCS ranks with their second round selection. They pick up William Maxey from Sam Houston State, and it could be a very good draft pick for the Chargers, as he is a hidden development trait guy. As for the Kansas City Chiefs, with their 24th overall selection in the first round of the NFL draft, the Kansas City Chiefs grab Connor Tani from Georgia Southern. He does play that tight end position, and he's going to be coming in with a hidden development trait as well. As for the Indianapolis Colts, they grab another one of your guys' customs in Havon Parker. He was selected with the 19th pick in the second round of the NFL draft. Coming in from Texas Southern, he will be a normal development trait guy at 22 years old. As for the Miami Dolphins, they grab Vitae Hans of Eastern Washington. He's also a 22-year-old with the third round selection in the 15th pick. He is also going to be a hidden dev trait guy as well, so great pick by the Dolphins. For the Green Bay Packers, they'll grab Bakari Smith in the second round. He's coming in from James Madison. He'll be coming over to play at the right outside linebacker position, and the second round draft pick is a normal dev trait guy. But one prospect I was particularly excited about is Marcus Latimer out of Northwestern State. He was a certified baller, and he was selected with the 20th pick in the second round of the NFL draft. He does come in as a hidden dev trait guy, so a great pick by the LA Rams. But rounding out the custom players that were actually drafted into the NFL, though, are guys that actually transferred up to FBS programs. One of them, of course, was Charles Watt, who started his career at Western Carolina before transferring up to Arizona State, and used that as an opportunity to boost his NFL draft stock, and he was selected with the 16th pick in the second round of the NFL draft. Meanwhile, with the very last pick in the second round of the NFL draft, David Dimitar was selected. He started his college career at Sam Houston State before landing at Missouri for his final year of college eligibility, and he's now a member of the Tennessee Titans. And with that being said, now that we went through all of the NFL draft picks, let's go ahead and check to see what new custom guys are joining the FBS college ranks via the transfer portal. So in year number 9, even though we don't see every custom guy leaving early actually going to the NFL, they did find landing spots at the FBS level. For example, Prince Davis, who was a Texas Southern transfer, he's actually going to go across the country in order to play his last year of college football with Fresno State. Now, where is he on the depth chart? Is he going to be listed as a starter? We'll go ahead and check that out, and he is going to be a starter. And the other guy that we saw end up transferring out of an FCS school in James Madison, they're going to Florida Atlantic. That's where it's going to be for his final season, and at 93 overall, he's got a pretty decent shot of still making it to the NFL, even though this time around, it just didn't work out for him. So now we embark on the final season of this simulation, as we're now here in year number 10 of this series. It's been a fun one for sure, but now we go ahead and jump right into what's those preseason polls are looking like. What is the landscape of FCS football going into a full decade, right? So this is what it's looking like right now, and a lot of national championship contenders to really keep an eye on. James Madison, of course, being one of those teams. They have an elite program, but watch out for teams like North Dakota State, Western Carolina, Georgia Southern, San Diego State, who actually is the defending national champion. They won it all back in year number 9. And then we also got Montana in there as well, that has a really elite program out in the west part of the country. Meanwhile, Southeast Missouri State, they got a great football team as well. Sacramento State's got a great team. So it really does feel open in terms of who could possibly win a national championship this season. Northern Arizona also is one of those teams to keep an eye on as well. And then this, of course, is wrapping up the remaining portions of the top 25. It's going to be interesting to see how different it looks when we do get into the remaining parts of the regular season. Now, with that being said, there is some guys to watch out for in the preseason Heisman watch. We got Emmanuel Torres, who is leading the way for North Dakota State. Was just a sophomore last season. He is now draft eligible if he chooses to do so. Had 42 touchdowns and 7 interceptions this past season. Then we also got guys like PJ McNair Jr. He led Alcorn State to the playoffs last season. He's now a senior redshirt for the Braves. 45 touchdowns and 18 interceptions this guy had last year. Also to look out for is the senior redshirt Jason Key, who's a senior redshirt at Alabama State. BK Whopper of Murray State, he led the Murray State Racers to the playoffs last year, had a great junior campaign. And then rounding out your group is Trey Harris, the senior wide receiver out of Western Carolina. But now we'll go ahead and check to see real fast if any of your custom guys did make it onto the All-American list. And it looks like at first glance we might not have any first team guys that are on that first team All-American list, at least among your guys' customs specifically, as it looks like there is no customs on the first team All-American list. However, on the second team All-American list, we do see PJ McNair Jr. He is the senior redshirt from Alcorn State, also a preseason Heisman finalist on that watch list to get things started here early on in the season. But he might be the only custom that I see on there, and it looks like it just might be, actually, because I'm not seeing any more customs on this list. Either way, we are going to go ahead. We're going to rock to the end of the regular season, and we're going to see who ends up making the playoffs and who really shows out over the course of the entire season. Alright boys, so we made it back to the end of the regular season here in year number 10, and boy did I tell you, we had some great regular season action. We'll go ahead and check out to see who ends up with the automatic bids to the year 10 FCS playoffs, starting with your conference champions, the most exciting which was Western Carolina taking on Chattanooga. Both was undefeated, but one only came out alive. That was the Catamounts winning 42-18 to win the Big 12. Meanwhile, Central Michigan, they get the automatic bid from the MAC Conference after beating Buffalo by 1 possession. Northwestern State also beating Nicholls State pretty convincingly, a 39-24 victory in the SEC Championship. However, we do have a potential bid stealer in South Carolina State, who wins 27-20 against North Carolina A&T, who was ranked going into this game. And finally, for the Conference USA Championship, Tulane and the Richmond Spiders did end up meeting up, and Tulane was the team that did come out on top. As for the other conferences that did not have any bowl games, we did end up seeing Tennessee State win the Ohio Valley Conference this season. There was a four-way tie, but Tennessee State does get the nod. They end up going 6-2 in conference play. Meanwhile, for the Big East, we do see a return for the Yale Bulldogs. Yale does end up going undefeated in the Ivy League this season. All of their wins were in conference play, but they will be representing the Ivy League in the FCS playoffs. Over in the Mountain West, we do see the defending national champions, the San Diego State Aztecs, will get their way into the FCS playoffs once again, doing so by winning the Mountain West Conference. They get their automatic bid as well. As for the Big Sky Conference, I'll go to Sacramento State this season as the Hornets go undefeated and will have the number 2 seed in the FCS playoffs. And then rounding out your automatic bids is Stephen F. Austin, who made their first FCS playoff appearance last season, but they'll be back in once again. They'll likely have the number 24 seed in the tournament as the automatic qualifier for the WAC conference. So with the number of bid stealers that we saw in the conference championship this year, the standard was just much higher for at-large teams this season. Going through the teams that made it in as an at-large, we start with Idaho State, who's making their first FCS playoff appearance as a number 5 seed. Meanwhile, Murray State gets in as the 6th seed. Chattanooga, despite losing in the conference championship, they're still in as the number 7 seed. Southeast Missouri State will also be rounding out the first round buys as they garner the number 8 overall seed. As for the number 10 seed, that will go to the Texas Southern Tigers, 11 going to Nicholls State, 12 going to the Eastern Kentucky Colonels. At 13, we see the Georgia Southern Eagles. It does have them listed as the conference champion for the SEC. That is a glitch because Northwestern State, as you guys saw earlier, did actually win that conference. Not Georgia Southern, but they're a good team nonetheless. Montana gets in at number 14, Northern Arizona at number 15, James Madison gets in as number 16 overall team, Stanford in at number 17, Alcorn State gets in as number 18, and then the last at-large team to be selected for the FCS playoffs is a first-timer, the Delaware State Hornets. They get into the playoffs for the very first time, and they'll be locked in as the number 19 overall seed in this tournament. However, there will be some teams that will unfortunately be left off, as New Hampshire is the last team out. They were a dominant power, but they have fallen off in the last couple of seasons. They missed the playoffs for 2 years in a row. Bethune-Cookman also almost made it in. Delaware was very close as well. South Dakota State had one of their best seasons in this Dynasty file, but they're going to fall short as well as Elon and San Jose State. So with that being said, let's go ahead and kick it right into the playoff action to see who wins that national championship here in year number 10. So we kick things off in the first round of the FCS playoffs as James Madison does get it started, beating Sanford 38-14 in order to take on Western Carolina in the second round. However, Stephen F. Austin, despite being the lowest seed, put up a pretty big fight, but they fall just short against the Tennessee State Tigers 38-31. As for Georgia Southern, they actually managed to blank South Carolina State completely as the Georgia Southern Eagles win 32-0 their first round matchup. As for Tulane, they actually pull the only upset that I think we're going to see in the first round. They take down Eastern Kentucky 28-20. As for the bottom half of the first round, we see a shootout between Alcorn State and Northern Arizona, but the Lumberjacks do end up winning 55-39. As for Texas Southern, they also handle their business against the champions of the Ivy League, as Texas Southern does end up winning that game 38-24. And then to round out the first round, we have Montana being able to take down the newcomers in Delaware State 38-19. And of course, for the final first round matchup, we see Nicholls State able to beat Central Michigan, who are champions of the MAC, 31-20. But now we move on to the second round of the FCS playoffs, and a big upset to get things going as the 16-seeded James Madison Dukes are able to beat the Western Carolina Catamounts 56-35 in a shootout. As for who James Madison will go up against, they'll be taking on the Tennessee State Tigers, who beat Southeast Missouri State, a fellow conference opponent, 45-28. Meanwhile, Northwestern State takes down their fellow conference opponent, Georgia Southern, as the Demons do end up winning 41-28. And it looks like the Demons will be taking on the newcomers in Idaho State in their first FCS playoff appearance. They win their first ever playoff game against the Tulane Green Wave, 31-22. Now, in the bottom half of the bracket, though, we see Sacramento State handle its business against fellow Big Sky opponent Northern Arizona, winning 45-20. And the Hornets will be taking on the Texas Southern Tigers, who end up beating Chattanooga in a close one, 32-31. But that being said, though, we will see a new national champion yet again, as San Diego State cannot defend the crown. They actually did have a 22-game winning streak going in, but Montana was still too much, winning 49-36. And as for who Montana will face, they'll be taking on the Nicholls State Colonels, who win an absolute shootout against the Murray State Racers, 57-38. But now we advance to the quarterfinals of the FCS playoffs, and James Madison continues their Cinderella run, this time beating Tennessee State in a close one, 34-32. As for who James Madison will face in the semifinals, it's going to be the Northwestern State Demons, who made quick work of the Idaho State Bengals, as Northwestern State wins 49-16. Meanwhile, Sacramento State is determined to win a national championship, and they blow out yet another team in this playoffs. This time it's Texas Southern, as the Hornets win 55-17 to go to the semifinals. As for who the Sacramento State Hornets will be playing, they'll actually go up against the Montana Grizzlies, a fellow Big Sky opponent, after they beat Nicholls State 51-24. But now to decide who goes to the national championship game, and James Madison continues the Cinderella run, this time beating Northwestern State 32-24. And we could have a very competitive national championship game on our hands, as the number 2 seeded Sacramento State Hornets, well, they beat the Montana Grizzlies 38-28. But I was proven wrong quickly for that national championship matchup, as Sacramento State makes quick work. They dominate James Madison in the national championship game 45-6, and if my memory serves me correct, Sacramento State wins their first national title in this series. As for who the award winners do happen to be here in year number 10, we see Del Ware from Nicholls State does take home the Heisman Trophy. He ends up with over 5,000 yards of total offense on this season. Also, what considered in that Heisman consideration towards the end was Brady Whitaker, the senior quarterback for Western Carolina, another one of your customs, and BK Whopper, the senior redshirt from Murray State. He finishes in third place. And rounding out your group is a couple of guys from Tennessee Chattanooga, their quarterback Eric Jackson, who's a junior redshirt, and then their tailback in the backfield, Franklin Simpson, who's also a junior. As for the other award winners, there is no surprises that Del Ware does win the Maxwell Trophy as well. BK Whopper was right behind him. He manages to finish in second place. But rounding out the Maxwell Award group is yet another one of your customs, PJ McNair Jr., who finishes as a second-team All-Conference guy as well, finishing 12th in the Maxwell Award race. As for the Bednarik Award, that will be provided to Gene McCray, the senior linebacker out of Texas Southern with a phenomenal season. As for the Best Quarterback Award, that will also go to Del Ware with, again, BK Whopper right on his toenails. However, we do see a couple of other quarterbacks that are customs on this list. Stephen Henningsen does finish 8th in the Best Quarterback race, and then PJ McNair Jr. finished in 9th. He is the Alcorn State product. As for the Doak Walker Award, that will be awarded to JT Jameson this season. He's a senior running back from Georgia Southern. For best wide receiver in the country, that will be given to Justin Lowe, the senior wide receiver from New Mexico State. For best tight end, that will be given to Robert Crum, the senior tight end from Sanford. As for best offensive lineman, that will be given to the junior redshirt Tony Meadows from Texas Southern. He only allowed 2 sacks this year. As for the Remington Award, that is actually going to go to a true freshman. Ronnie Lewis of Texas Southern wins it. He had 34 pancakes and 5 sacks allowed in his first year of college eligibility. As for the Lombardi Trophy, that will be given to Bobby Jacobs, the senior defensive lineman out of San Diego State. For the best linebacker, they'll also be given to Gene McCray, the senior linebacker out of Texas Southern. For the Jim Forpay Award, that goes to true senior Marvin Adams. He is part of that national championship Sacramento State team and is a senior as well. We do end up seeing one of your customs, however, make the Jim Forpay Award finalist list, and that is the senior redshirt John Dynamite. John Dynamite had a good year with the Bulldogs with 4 interceptions in his final year of college eligibility. As for the Lou Groza Award, that'll be given to sophomore kicker Vince Cohen, who is from Tennessee Martin. For best punter, that'll be given to Ryan Carey, the junior punter out of Texas Southern. And the last of the awards is the best returnman in college football. And this year it will be given to senior wide receiver Matt Clement from Delaware State. His Delaware State squad was the first of which to make the FCS playoffs within that program in the series. Also receiving consideration, though, was Jeff Jefferson of Northern Arizona. He actually finishes in 4th place for the best returnman in the country. And now let's go ahead and check out the All-Americans that are featured on this list. And there's a few custom guys on there. And for the first team All-Americans, we have Delaware of Nicholls State. He's the Heisman Trophy as well as the Maxwell Award winner as well. We do also see the senior wide receiver Jeff Jefferson make the cut for that first team All-American list. He was in consideration for the best returnman in college football too. And then the only defensive player on the first team All-American list, as one of your guys' customs, was John Dynamite, who's still from South Carolina State. Meanwhile, for the second team All-Americans, looking to see if anybody got on there. It looks like there's one custom on the second team All-American list. That is senior wide receiver Cliff Coofington, who finished the year with 14 touchdown grabs. That being said, though, he was the only custom player that was named on the second team All-American list. So in the NFL draft, out of the 32 custom guys that were remaining in this season, going into season number 10, 3 of them did actually get drafted into the NFL ranks. The most notable of which is Carlos Mudd, who started his college career at James Madison. However, he transferred to Florida Atlantic for his final year of college football and really propelled his eligibility in his draft status. He's now the #1 overall pick for the Los Angeles Chargers. But he was not the only custom guy selected with a first round selection, because with the 16th overall pick, William Penn Jr. out of Southeast Missouri State was also selected as well. He is a 23-year-old rookie that does come in with a normal development trait. And then finally, with the second round of the NFL draft, with the 9th selection in that second round, the Miami Dolphins select Cliff Coofington from Western Carolina. He is a 23-year-old rookie that will also have a normal development trait as well. But one thing that is for sure, guys, is that this was absolutely amazing. This was a really fun series to do. This has been one of the most successful series on the channel, and I cannot thank you guys enough from the very bottom of my heart. So that being said, final episode of the FCS Dynasty, and during the course of this episode, we simulated through season 7 through 10, so we covered 4 years in just one episode alone. But even though it might be done with the conventional YouTube series, this is not going to be the last that you hear from this FCS Dynasty, because we are actually going to build upon this universe. You'll see elements of the FCS Dynasty in the next Sim League that is going to be coming to the channel, as well as parts of my Madden 24 series that will be coming out this fall. So hopefully you guys are excited for that. Again, I've probably said this multiple times already, but thank you guys so much from the bottom of my heart for supporting this series. It has grown my channel tremendously from the past year that I've done this, and I hope you enjoyed it through and through. If you enjoyed this final episode, make sure you go ahead, smack that like button, hit that subscribe button as well if you do happen to be brand new to the channel as well. This is John J. Gaming on the mic signing off. I'll catch you guys next time with the newest Sim League coming to the channel. But with that being said, this is John J. Gaming on the mic signing off. Hope you guys are all out there having a good one. Take care, everybody.